What's up, Weirdo Swarm? You are listening to Podagon Infinity, the podcast that opens the door to all things King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard. My name is Spenser.
My name is Joe, and we're doing things kind of backwards this week. We got a totally different, fun sort of episode for you today, outside of our usual album discussion format. And so we decided, why not? Let's totally flip things around and let Spenser start off the show. So it's kind of a little opposite day for us, but it's going to be a ton of fun. We're doing an album cover tournament style shootout today, where we're just gonna randomly generate a bracket of all the King Gizzard album covers and just discuss each matchup, and we're gonna have to agree on which one moves ahead until we have a final winner of the official Podagon Infinity Best King Gizzard album cover.
Yeah, we're going to have one album cover left standing at the end of this whole shootout, as you called it, Joe. And yeah, this is something a little bit different from what we've been doing lately for the most part in terms of our album discussions. And this is something we do hope to do more of on the show in terms of deviating from those album discussions, just to sort of break up the monotony a little bit. Not that we were getting tired of it. We have had a bunch of fun with those album discussions, obviously. But we do want to give you, our listeners, a little taste of everything, a little variety, just to keep things fun and exciting on this show.
I'm very excited to do this today. For a little bit of a change of pace will be nice, but yeah, we have been having a ton of fun with the album discussions, and we'll be right back to those very shortly, and next week, I'm sure, or the next coming weeks. Of course, there are a lot of albums, or most of the albums, that have not been covered on this show yet, so I guess we'll have some notes to say about each of them as we go, but we're not going to dig too deep into them. Today is all about focusing on the artwork, the album covers themselves. This is not a comparison of how much we like the music from each one or anything, but before we jump into all that, as usual, we're going to read a listener message that we have this week, so Spenser, why don't you go ahead and read that for us?
All right, here we go. This message comes to us via email, podagoninfinity@gmail.com. This message comes from Sam K. Sam says, "Hey, Joe and Spenser. My name is Sam, and I'm from the south coast of the UK. I've been tuning into your podcasts whenever I have a spare minute. I became a casual Gizz fan after I heard Podagon Infinity in a record shop and saw them live in Brighton in 2017, where Stu crowd-surfed all the way to the sea and underwent a baptism of sorts." Love that. Flash forward to 2022, I became a super fan and finally went to two of their UK shows in May this year, Wolverhampton and Brighton Acoustic, and they were both amazing for different reasons. No baptisms this time, but an acoustic witchcraft more than made up for it. Unbelievable set lists from both nights. The Wolverhampton had so many of my favorite songs I wasn't expecting. Anyway, question time. I saw they've announced an experimental synth table rave set in San Francisco, and I was wondering if you guys could tailor a King Gizzard gig that's just in one style, example, metal, microtonal, boogie, garage, psych rock, jam band, mellow acoustic, what would you choose? I'd personally choose either metal or jam band. Peace and love from the other side of the Atlantic. So again, that's from Sam K. Thank you, Sam, for writing in. Joe, you want to lead us off with that? What do you think would be your style of choice for a King Gizz show?
Yeah, sure thing. So first of all, I just wanted to mention that's so awesome that you got to go to that acoustic show over there. That you did mention that they did an acoustic witchcraft there, and I remember watching the video of that, just thinking that was so awesome, and that got me so hyped for the acoustic show in Detroit, which they did play a little bit of Motor Spirit mixed in with Thea, which was awesome. So I got to have a similar experience to you. That's super cool. So reading through your question earlier, my immediate answer that comes to mind from one of your examples that you gave is definitely the boogie kind of show, because I've seen them 3 times now, including, the recent 2 shows that we talked about on a previous episode, and I still have yet to hear any Fishing for Fishy songs. And that was, if you've been listening to the show, you know that that's the album that kind of started it all for both me and Spenser. It was the one that got me into the band, and I knew some other stuff before, but that's what really got me in deep with them, and that's the album that I gave Spenser to listen to a little while back to get him into the band as well. So I would have to say boogie. I want to hear that Fishy stuff, as well as some other kind of boogie-ish rock jams that they have in their discography. I will give a little honorable mention to a full-on metal show. Would be sick, but I did get to hear a lot of the Petro stuff and whatnot on recent shows, which was super awesome, but I would take that as well. What about you, Spencer?
Yeah, I would go a similar direction. I know that's no surprise to you, Joe, or to most of our listeners by this point.
Yeah.
As you hinted at, given our Fishing for Fishies origins as Gizz heads, we're kind of biased in that regard. But I think, going to the Philly show and experiencing several of the Flight B741 tracks to an extent scratched that itch for us. So that was good news, at least.
Yeah, definitely a little bit.
Yeah, but to branch off a little bit, I'm going to give an honorable mention as well, just so we don't get too boring in giving the same top answer. Whereas I do like the metal side of King Gizz, of course, I would love to see this synth table rave set in person. I think this would be my honorable mention that I would go to. I know the Silver Chord has been a polarizing album. I am a Silver Chord stan, and you can take that with you for the rest of your time listening to this show. That is my stance on the Silver Chord. I will always be an apologist for that beautiful electronic album. I also love Made in Timeland, which kind of paved the way for that a little bit in terms of the electronic side of the Gizz catalog. So that's my thoughts and my insights on your question here, Sam. Thank you for writing in.
Man, I cannot believe I didn't have that same thought as you, but now that you say it, my mind is racing with all the possibilities of a full electronic show. Like not only Silver Chord, but also some more Butterfly 3000, maybe even like Intrasport, which I know was a big one that you wanted to hear more than anything when we talked before the live shows. So I don't know. Yeah, there's so much potential with that. And if there's anybody out there listening that ends up going to that electronic experimental rave set, whatever they're calling it, out in California, please reach out and let us know how that is after it happens. I need to hear about it.
Yeah, you can email us, as I mentioned, like Sam did, podagoninfinity@gmail.com, or you can DM us on any of our socials, Facebook, Instagram, or X. We would love to hear from you.
And with all that said, let's jump into it.
So the idea for this episode that we're recording now was something that we spawned actually relatively recently. Joe, you and I were tossing back and forth a couple of ideas for something we could do to deviate from the album discussion format that has made up the bulk of our show so far, and we arrived on this album artwork showdown idea, which was an idea we became pretty proud of pretty quickly, and we decided to leave it up to you, the listeners, on what the exact format of this would be. We put it out there on Instagram on our story, and as those of you who follow us on Instagram know, we put out a poll whether we should do a bracket-style tournament structure to this episode or a tier list ranking structure to the episode. And of course, as you could see by now, bracket-style won out. 13-8 were the final numbers on that. So that's what we'll be going with. A little bit of a funky-looking bracket, as it turns out. We were originally going to do 26 album covers, but we didn't want to leave Willoughby's Beach out. We know that's not technically canon for most outlets and most people's conception of the King Gizzard catalog, since that album was self-released. It was not on Flightless or on a label at that point. So we decided to include Willoughby's Beach, so there will be 27 pieces of album artwork on this bracket-style tournament.
Thank you to all of you that participated in our Instagram stories poll in deciding this tournament style for this episode. I was originally thinking the tier list would be a lot more fun or a lot easier to do, but this bracket style tournament is going to be super fun. It's going to be contentious, and this way Spencer and I can fight over it a little more, and it might make better content. I don't know.
Yeah, there will be yelling and cursing, so I hope you've prepared yourself.
All right, enough yapping. Let's get into this thing.
Let's get ready to rumble!
Woo! Okay, so we have our bracket generator here, and we have all the album covers placed in and randomized. So these matchups are completely randomized. I hit randomize once and then left it alone. So there's no bias, there's no thought that went into the matchups at all. It's completely randomized. So round one, we have Willoughby's Beach versus Quarters.
Well, fittingly enough, since Willoughby's Beach was sort of a last-minute shoe-in to this bracket-style tournament, I find it funny that Willoughby's Beach is in part of this initial matchup, or at least the first one that happened to pop up here. So, I'm looking at these two side by side, and the art influence here is very similar, very similar sort of psychedelic motif going on with both of them. On the Willoughby's Beach side, it's very much like rudimentary early Gizzard, and we should note that this was actually not done by Jason Galea, as was the bulk of the Gizzard catalog in terms of album artwork. Willoughby's Beach cover art was created by, and I apologize if I'm butchering the pronunciation of this, an artist residing in Bali named Ikan Haram. And so, not that that necessarily will have an effect on our selection here of which album wins between the two, but we wanted to note that this is not Jason Galea's work here. However, Galea did create the famous, beloved Quarters album artwork, and Joe, I am leaning slightly in one direction, but before I give away which way I'm leaning, I want to hear your thoughts on how these two hold up against one another.
Yeah, thanks for pointing out the artist that made the Willoughby's Beach artwork is not Jason, but I think every other album cover that we're going to talk about is Jason, or at least a collaboration of Jason, maybe with some additional help. This one, I'm going to be honest, this is an easy one for me. As much as the Willoughby's Beach artwork is kind of iconic, and I think it does represent the early grittiness of King Gizzard very well, how could you pick that over Quarters, man? The Quarters album cover is beautiful. It's 4 songs, and you got 4 panels perfectly placed together, each representing one of the tracks. It's iconic, it's beloved, and even if Quarters isn't my favorite project of theirs, that's it for me.
Yeah.
Sorry, Willoughby's, you're out for me.
Yeah, we did fall on the similar side there. I think it was a little closer for me, but Quarters definitely wins this matchup. So sorry, Willoughby's Beach, you are not moving on. Quarters, welcome to the next round.
If not for anything else, it's got the Gators on the album cover, so
it does, of course.
That's all the points it needs right there.
The river.
Oh no.
Oh
no.
God.
Okay. So round 1 was pretty easy for us, but round 2 sucks because it's Paper Mache Dream Balloon versus Murder of the Universe, and I hate this matchup. This one's gonna make me mad right away.
Yeah, man, this is gonna be a tough one. You have such stark opposites here in this matchup. You have the happy dream world, almost hippy-dippy looking Paper Mache, and the mutant, altered, if you will, dark, evil nature of the Murder of the Universe artwork.
The vomit-soaked wasteland.
These are two very different worlds, and of course, if you're not a Gizz head, if you're not someone who has followed the band ever, and you're coming in cold looking at these two, you would assume they're by different bands, right?
Yeah, this one is too funny to me, man, but this is just how stuff like this is gonna happen. Oh, God. Okay. 2 very beloved albums to me. As I've mentioned before, Vomit Coffin was weirdly the first song I ever heard by Gizz. So the Murder of the Universe album cover is something I've been looking at for a long time and appreciating. I like how just weird and surreal it is. It's almost hard you got to stare at it for a while and kind of make different images out of it. It's tough, and the Paper Mache Dream Balloon album cover is iconic. We just talked about how much we loved it in our episode we did on that album a couple weeks ago. So God, you couldn't really have more of a contrast, could you? I think for me, just because of even though I love the really kind of weird, surreal, out there nature of Murder of the Universe and some of their other artwork, I love that Jason's able to pull off stuff like that. But I'm going to go Paper Mache. It's tough, but I'm going to go Paper Mache. I love the clay models of all the band members and just kind of the photography and having those physical objects made and then photographed is really unique and something they don't do all the time with their album covers. So that's my pick.
So far, this episode is not living up to its billing as one of contentiousness and fighting and screaming and cursing at one another, because Joe, I'm agreeing with you on this one as well.
Yeah, okay.
There is so much to be said, of course, for Murder of the Universe and its fantastical, dark nature and just the way it lures you into what this dark masterpiece is going to be all about. But when it comes to Paper Mache, just the hands-on clay work and all the background, you can picture all the little mosses and greenery that Jason must have played around to put all this together. And I may be slightly biased on this one, but when I was young, I used to play with clay quite a bit. Once I graduated from Play-Doh after getting out of preschool and kindergarten, I started to make some clay figures with wire skeletons inside of them, trying to become almost like the next claymation animator. I actually briefly took a claymation class at a local rec center years ago. But yeah, this reminds me of those days of just having that hands-on, like squishing the clay around, seeing what you can create kind of feeling. Paper mache takes the cake on this one.
All right, paper mache moves on.
Okay, so our next matchup as we continue on in this preliminary round of the bracket, Made in Timeland against Oddments. Seeing these two side by side, they're similar in terms of just sort of the psychedelic nature of it, and of course the word psychedelic is going to come up plenty. This is King Gizz after all. In slightly different approaches, though, these are both works by Galea, but Timeland is almost more of a tiled approach. You see you got the clock with the hour and the minute hands extending outward and pointing to almost a little tag or like a postage stamp size oval, I guess, which has the title inside of it. But behind that, you have the backdrop of almost that same image repeated in these square tile sections, 5 by 5. Meanwhile, on the right side of our screen here, we're looking at Oddments, which is such a colorful and trippy. I mean, this just looks like something straight out of an acid trip. Not gonna lie. Not speaking from experience, just speaking from what I know based on people who have shared such experiences. And it's one of those works of art that more so than Timeland, I think, you're able to pick out unique elements that take up this space. There's so many different colors at play, different shapes, letters that look like balloon animals squished into tight spaces. You got letters that are more stretchy, some that are more jagged, and you have all these like creatures and faces in between. This is an easier one for me. I'm definitely going with Oddments. How about you, Joe?
Looking at both of these images side by side, I feel like I'm like being hypnotized or something. Like it's melting my brain. And I think that's going to be a case for a lot of these, but this one, god damn, there's a lot happening right now. Bit of overstimulation. Man, the Made in Timeland one is awesome. It's trippy. It's very evocative of the nature of that album itself. If you even want to call it an album, it's 2 songs, but it's 30 whole minutes. And it's weird, and it's very fitting for it, but Oddments, the name and the artwork, is also fitting for the music. It's a weird, odd collection of weird, trippy, goofy stuff. As much as I want to start fighting you to make this more interesting, I'm going to agree, and I'm going to send Oddments on through.
All right, Oddments, congratulations. You're moving on.
Okay, moving on to what I think is round 4. We have kind of a unique, interesting matchup here of 2 very different album covers. We have the first actual album from King Gizz, 12 Bar Brews, up against 2022's Changes, which couldn't really be more different. So, man, what are your initial thoughts on this, Spencer?
Yeah, you definitely have 2 different eras, 2 different styles represented. We talked about the Willoughby's Beach design earlier in terms of just that rudimentary, gritty, almost intentionally messy feel to the early Gizz aesthetic. And then on the flip side, you have Changes, which is a much cleaner approach and an appropriately pretty retro-looking design and layout. You just have that white border with that big black bold font. It looks like something straight out of the 70s or the 80s maybe, just the way that's laid out with the image front and center. And I think that really fits the aesthetic of that album musically. But dude, this is a hard one for me just because of the disparity of styles. Like it's so hard to choose one that sits above the other. I do appreciate, though, on the Changes side, the background chosen for that band photo. Should note that another note that we have taken here, that photo on the Changes cover was taken in Spain when the band was on tour. Photo was taken by Jason Galea at, and I apologize if I butcher this pronunciation as well, it looks almost like French and Spanish combined, Jardín de las Tres Ximenes Park in Barcelona, Spain.
I'm sure you nailed it.
Yeah. Hopefully I got close at least. Galea also did the bordering artwork on this cover as well. But I feel like I'm dancing around and skirting around trying to make a decision here. The one I'm leaning toward is Changes, because once you get past the the very basic feel of the border. That's a really cool photo. It's got kind of a fisheye lens type of look to it. Yeah, it's Stu with the bucket hat, which made a reappearance on this tour during the synth table sets, and the rest of the band just kind of a little bit closer toward the background there. But that graffiti backdrop in that skate park is really cool, and I do appreciate the sort of intentionally murky nature of the 12-bar Bruise cover. It's tough to really make heads or tails of all those creatures and what they're going for behind the gator or the lizard in this case. I'm going with changes. What do you think, Joe?
Yeah, I do love the 12-bar Bruise cover. It's also classic and evocative of those early Gizzard days because it is super colorful and kind of messy looking. And we have our lizard man with a sword fighting off all sorts of like bugs and bird creatures surrounding him. I've never stared at it so closely as I am right now. I'm kind of mesmerized by it. It's fantastic. But I also love the changes cover as much as I might want to take away points for it not being, hand-drawn artwork like most of them. It's a photograph with some cool design elements around the photo. Speaking of which, I love the piano keys as the border around the photo. Definitely gets points for that. I love that. You know what? I'm going to also go with changes as well. It's done so well, and just for whatever reason, the colors and the vibe of it really feel like they fit the energy of the music on that album to me. So I'm going to go with changes as well. Changes beating out 12-bar Bruise.
All right, so the fifth matchup of this bracket tournament, we have Podagon Infinity against Float Along, Fill Your Lungs. I made it a mission of mine going into this episode that I'm not going to let my feelings on the albums dictate how I feel about the artwork and let that bias my approach here. So I'm just going to say that by far, a much more creative approach here on Float Along, Fill Your Lungs, despite the fact that Podagon has such lofty stature in the Gizz catalog. You obviously have the Podagon shape surrounding the band wordmark there, and then you have sort of that craggy cliff in the background and the dark surroundings, the red clouds. As so many of the other album covers do, it really hints, they both actually do in this matchup, hint well at the contents within. Podagon is so frantic and epic and dark and creepy at times, fun at times, whereas Float Along, Fill Your Lungs, psychedelic and groovy, man. And I think this like projection of the colors on these squares that nestle inside each other almost like Russian nesting dolls. It's such a cool feel. And then you have the band superimposed on it, the 7 of them at the time, because Eric was still in the band then. This one just grips my attention so much more easily. My eyes are gravitating toward it so much more easily and readily than they do toward Podagon.
You're definitely right that these two are also, well representative of the music within them. I agree with that. And it's kind of weird, back-to-back 2 rounds now, we've gotten album covers with the band members on them. There's not a lot of those. I think there might only be like 3 or 4, but this is one of the few already coming up here. Interesting fact here about the Float Along album cover is that Jason didn't work on this one alone. It was actually shot by a guy named Ben Butcher, but Jason apparently created that projection and did the overall art layout on the thing that you see there. So a little bit of a collaboration with Jason and another artist on this one. So finally, the time has come for us to disagree, Spencer. Ooh. How dare you pick the wrong album cover on this round?
It's on like Donkey Kong. Bring it.
Finally, we're here. Some contention. Yeah, for me, I wanted to go with Podagon on this one. And I'm also trying to do the same thing where I'm not letting my feelings on the music and the album itself take over too much and bias me towards picking one over the other. I'm really trying to just stare at the artwork itself. But I don't know. Last time we went with changes, and this time is, it's another one of those ones with the guys on the cover. And although the projection idea is really cool and I like how it's done, to me, it's just not quite as eye-catching or stand out to me as the iconic Podagon Infinity album cover. I can't get away from it. The Podagon symbol is such an iconic logo of the band that's used all over the place. People have gotten tattoos of it. It's just so badass. We have those air fresheners that I brought back from Detroit that are the Podagon cinnamon scented air fresheners. Yes. It's inescapable. It's everywhere. It's such a big piece of the band's image, I feel like, and it's just way too iconic for me. So I'm going with Podagon on this one. So how are we going to resolve this? You want to give a counter argument and try to sway me, or am I pulling you towards my direction a little bit on this one?
As much as I would like to sway you, and as much as I still stand behind my words and my thoughts as far as the bright colors and the projection and sort of that color gradient between green and yellow, orange, red, it's just... It captures the attention so easily, but you do make such a good argument, Joe, for Nonagon, just the symbol itself, the Nonagon shape behind the word mark, and something about the fidelity and the quality of the Nonagon cover art. It looks very retro. It looks almost like something taken from the 70s, or almost like... Oh man, almost like a movie title that you would see on screen, circa 1965 or 1970. Like it has that just not quite clean edge to the to all the shapes and the word mark. Something about it's retro, and I think you sold me a little bit. So yeah, I'm gonna have to give in to you, and obviously with the iconic nature of this one, it would be really hard to knock out Nonagon in the first round, so let's let Podagon Infinity into the next round.
Yippee, I win! Okay, next round here, we have another one that I think is going to be extremely difficult because I love both of these artworks. Such different albums, but so good nonetheless. We have Polygon Dwanaland versus Eyes Like the Sky. The music itself between these two albums is very, very different, and the artwork is very, very different, but each iconic in its own right. Of course, we're trying not to let our feelings on the music itself cause any influence here. I will say that Eyes Like the Sky is one that I haven't listened to as much as Poly. Poly I revisit all of the time, so I've spent a lot more time staring at that album artwork. But looking at Eyes Like the Sky now, it is beautiful. It is full of detail and emotion, and gives you kind of exactly what you're getting into when you pop that album on. And then Polygon Dwanaland, of course, going the more trippy, psychedelic, surreal kind of route that Jason has done so well on many of their other album covers. So I'll let you take over here, Spencer, and give your thoughts.
Okay, well, like you, I don't go back to Eyes Like the Sky very much, though I do enjoy what they go for musically and thematically on that album. Interestingly, Polygon Dwanaland, I haven't re-listened to very many times either. It's a fantastic album, and I really do enjoy it. It's just so dense and rife with backstory and lore and meaning that, I don't know, I have a hard time getting into the right headspace to give it sort of the respect, if you will, that the album deserves. I so often find myself gravitating toward the punchier, kind of shorter song structures found on other albums that I unfortunately don't go back to Polygon Dwanaland as much as I think I should. And this may be one of my hotter, more controversial takes in this bracket so far. Dude, I'm leaning toward Eyes Like the Sky. I really do appreciate what Jason went for with Polygon Dwanaland's album cover. You have so many cool little details. It almost looks like part board game, part video game, part like adventure map, something or other. You got all these cool colored blocks and shapes with a dark background beneath it, and of course the crumbling castle in the foreground, you can't forget. And every little sub point on this album has special meanings, and you have Polygon Dwanaland spelled out in those little tiny circles inside that red portion of the window up at the top of the cover. But maybe it's the fact that I grew up in the inland Northwest, and certain parts of Washington State where I grew up, if you get outside of civilization, it almost looks like the story of Eyes Like the Sky could have taken place there years and years ago, centuries ago. It's this dusty frontier, lots of parts of which are still heavily unpopulated. Eyes Like the Sky just evokes a particular era, particular aesthetic. Dude, I'm leaning Eyes Like the Sky. I never thought I would go this way on a matchup like this. What do you think?
God, this is so hard. I'm looking at like a blown up version of the Polygon Dwanaland album cover because I wanted to confirm something, but I love the little details throughout it. There's so much to stare at. I could stare at this thing for so long. The name of each song is on the album cover in different places, some that are numbered off to the right. There's more to the left. Of course, Polygon Dwanaland at the top is both the name of the album and one of the tracks. And there's some lyrics that kind of like wind around different parts of the album cover. There's like so much to stare at, but you couldn't be more right about the Eyes Like the Sky cover. It's very, very evocative of the style and just kind of the place that it takes you to, this old American West feeling. And it's even got eyes on the album cover that have like different weather patterns within them. Like it looks like there's rain, lightning, clouds, and sun in one of them. So it's like all the different weather that you would see up in the sky. It's, god damn, this one is too hard. I was leaning towards Poly, but as I'm talking about Eyes Like the Sky, it's making it really hard. So, oh god, I love the Polygon Dwanaland cover so much. I feel like I can't let it die, but at the same time, I'm so in between that since you went ahead and picked Eyes Like the Sky, I might just have to go that way in order to move on.
Oh man, okay, so we're 1-1 in terms of convincing one another when the other's been on the fence.
I surrender. I have to surrender on this one. It's too much pressure. It's killing me. I love Poly. I'm so sorry. I didn't want this to happen.
Oh man. Okay. I feel like we're going to be getting messages and emails about this one, Joe. So
we're getting canceled for this one.
Yes, we probably are. I'm happy I was able to convince you, but yeah, we better be ready for that onslaught. Okay. So our next matchup here as we continue this preliminary round. This matchup brings us Laminated Denim against Omnium Gatherum. I'm leaning very heavily one way. I won't give it away just yet, but just a quick analysis of the elements that both these pieces of art bring us. Laminated Denim is cool with the sort of the clock pattern around the title, and you have the little elements at the bottom split up into thirds, and of course you can't overlook the fact that this was packaged in denim for some folks to buy. I think, Joe, if I'm not mistaken, you added that to your collection a while back.
Yes, I did. Yeah, when I was going to point that out as soon as this matchup came up here. Yeah, when I first saw the guys live in fall of 2022, I purchased a copy of this album at the show because it was in an actual denim sleeve. And the one I got was, they had two different versions. One was a dark blue jean that looks just like the album cover you see, when you look at it online. But then they had another one that was a lighter acid washed jeans look. And I went with that one. I thought that was unique and stood out, was a little different than the original, but I just thought that was so cool. So this one's Laminated Denim's getting serious points for that. And not to mention the fact that the actual album cover, all of the artwork looks like it's actually sewn on, or like it's made out of, it's like patches placed onto jeans. And then of course the whole background is that dark blue denim look. So, but then Omnium Gatherum on the other hand is very different and very, once again, we're at that abstract trippy zone over here with just these layers and shapes and patterns that just multiply and spread off into the horizon with mountains and clouds in the background and everything. It's really harder to describe and to make some concise thoughts out of it, but it's trippy, and you could definitely stare at it for a very long time and find new elements within it, just like I was saying about Poly.
Yeah, Omnium Gatherum definitely has that menacing look to it, like you're about to enter some forbidden palace up in the... Somehow, this palace sits way above the clouds among these mountain peaks, as you mentioned. It's really just that whole kind of monochromatic, different shades of beige or like a peachy color, and it really almost indicates you're going to get a hell of a dark, heavy album, and you get a couple of tracks that are like that, obviously, but, the title itself indicates this is everything all at once, all sorts of things together in one package of sorts. Obviously, we're not talking about the music here, we're focusing on the art. To me, this is a landslide. Whereas Laminated Denim, I certainly appreciate the creativity. Omnium Gatherum is just so epic and badass looking. I'm picking this album up. If I'm at a record store, I'm picking this up and I'm like, okay, I need to know what's on this album for sure. That's the winner for me. What do you have, Joe?
Really quick note, I did not research this ahead of time, but I just figured this out now while staring at the album cover. I'm learning new things about these just from staring at them for long enough. In the background, underneath the words Laminated Denim on that cover, there's what looks like a stitched light blue outline. And I never really looked at it long enough to figure out what those shapes are actually making up. But I had a feeling, I started to recognize some of those shapes. I'm like, some of those look like some of the continents on this earth that I'm familiar with. And wouldn't you know, it's an outline of Gondwana land, which is, if you ever heard of like Pangea, it's, I think, took place a little while after that. I don't know exactly how long ago Gondwanaland was on Earth, but it's basically, when the theory that all the continents were once together as Pangea in one big landmass, and then later on started to separate. Gondwanaland, which was the inspiration for Polygondwanaland, of course, that's where you know that from, was like a little bit after that, and it's where you could see all the continents' shapes more starting to separate. So really interesting that they included that in the background of the album cover. That's going to give it some points for me. That is super cool. And for all of those reasons, I think I want to go laminated denim on this one. This is tough, and we agreed a couple times in a row and earlier on in the bracket, and I knew that wasn't going to last, but now here we are facing each other again. I originally thought Omnium was going to take it easily for me, just with how detailed and crazy it is, and I also love the little, guardian gargoyle dudes with the scythes standing on either end of it like it is some kind of entrance. But for me, I have to go laminated denim. It's the uniqueness of it, the way that it looks like real denim with patches, and it's got all these sort of details baked into it, but without being too overwhelming or trippy to look at. I'm going laminated denim, so how are we going to resolve this, Spencer?
Okay, Joe, you can't hear it. It's not coming across on the mic right now, but I'm cracking my knuckles. I'm getting ready to put those boxing gloves on and step into the ring because we're going down here.
Good thing we record this podcast remotely from each other and not in the same room.
It probably is for the best, yeah. So I'm glad you appreciate it and see all the elements that I think make Omnium Gatherum so cool, so badass, and in turn, I do recognize all the neat elements of laminated denim. I will say, you did convince me a little bit maybe to give laminated denim a couple more points because of that Gondwanaland sublimated texture or pattern underneath the title. I don't think I'm giving in just yet, though. I just love the landscape that Omnium Gatherum presents and just the breadth of it. It gives this feeling like you're entering into a world that contains multitudes, and of course the record itself does. I'm once again dancing around making a decision here. I'm still stuck on Omnium Gatherum, but you did make a stronger case than I had in my head on my own for laminated denim. That said, I'm not fully budging just yet. I see what you're doing now. I see what you're doing.
All right, hear me out. I didn't want it to come to this, but we can't sit here forever. We got to keep the show going. So we're going to flip a coin, and whichever one wins is what moves on, because there's no way we're getting around this. Sometimes we're just going to be stuck. We're going to be at a stalemate. For the sake of the show, we have to keep going. I will let you pick first, though, Spencer. Heads or tails?
Tails never fails. Let's go.
All right, tails for Omnium Gatherum. I'm heads for laminated denim. Here we go. And Tails wins.
Yeah!
You can have your way. Tails has not failed. That means Omnium's going to be moving on. My arguments for laminated denim were not strong enough to make it happen, but we love you, laminated denim. I will always cherish my vinyl of that thing. Okay, moving on to the next matchup, we have the most recent album of King Gizz, the lovely Flight B741, up against the iconic and the origins of the microtonal stuff. Of course, it's Flying Microtonal Banana. Let's go.
Okay, so I think these randomly generated matchups did such a great job, as it turns out by pure chance, of course, of juxtaposing different styles, starkly different styles, in most of these matchups we have taken on so far. You have Flight B741 on the left side of our screen, that very hands-on by Jason Galea work with the clay and wood and a physical backdrop in the room up against it all. Creative in its own right, and then equally creative in its own totally different right. You have Flying Microtonal Banana on the right. That's all done with computer animation and whatever, but a cool little character in the gas mask suit guy playing the microtonal banana guitar and charming a snake coming out of the vat, that barrel filled with radioactive substances. And I have never zoomed in on this album cover as much as you have just now for us. You see the band members' names listed on the left, you see the track listing on the bottom right, and Flying Microtonal Banana, the title, at kind of center bottom. And yeah, I like how it's all put together, kind of in this funky shape, bordering the art. And you see in the top left, explorations into microtonal tuning. In a similar vein to Polygon Dwanaland, I like all the elements that this comprises in terms of the track listing and all these different pieces, but you have to zoom in pretty far to see them in most applications, I think. And you could probably tell by now which direction I'm leaning on this matchup. I think Flight B741, with its hands-on creativity in a way similar to what we discussed earlier with Paper Mache Dream Balloon, I just admire that a little bit more, and so Flight B741 takes this one for me, with all due respect to Microtonal Banana.
Yeah, of course, Microtonal Banana is iconic. It's a classic of theirs, a beloved album, and a iconic imagery on this one as well. But you know what? On this one, we don't have to fight. I'm going to go with you on B741 here. I'm a sucker for like the physical artwork being photographed, and just all of the hands-on elements that went into this from Jason is really impressive. I love all the pigs and the plane, and if we're just speaking strictly the artwork itself and my appreciation for the work that went into it, I'm going to agree with you, and I'm going to go ahead and push B741 on through.
Bump. Bump, bump.
Woo pig suey.
Alrighty, next up, we have I'm in Your Mind Fuzz against Infest the Rat's Nest. Joe, I think these are probably the first time since our initial matchup when we saw Willoughby's Beach against Quarters, probably almost the most evenly matched album artwork pieces between one another. Both very heavy, kind of dark imagery presented within for both. And I'm going to keep it a secret for now, even though you actually had access to the information ahead of time. I'm going to keep it hidden from you for now, but I'm definitely leaning toward Rat's Nest, but I'm not going to tell you the reason why. Even though I love the Mind Fuzz cover, Rat's Nest is a pretty significant step above between the two. I wonder if you could figure out why for me also, but also want to hear your thoughts, of course.
Okay, all right, interesting. Tip in your hand so early on this one. I'm not surprised. I know you're a fan of that album as well, and Rat's Nest, I'm sure, is one that you've, like myself, spent more time with overall in your time listening to the band over Mind Fuzz, but Mind Fuzz is one of the absolutely, older, iconic fan favorite albums, so I'm sure this one would be tough for most people. I love Rat's Nest. Rat's Nest is another one of those ones where I think, if I'm not mistaken, this was also like a physical piece of some type that was photographed. I could be wrong on that. Do you know?
Yeah, I remember seeing a photographed model piece, but I don't know if that's actually it on the album cover or if it's just recreated artistically. But yeah, I couldn't tell you for sure one way or the other. I'm sure listeners can sound off for us.
Yeah, we'll have to find out from somebody out there smarter than us. But either way, one thing that I love about the Rat's Nest album cover is the fact that each side of it is half of a rat's skull, creating sort of an archway or a door to hell, if you will, with some steps leading up, and there's sort of this ominous red glow coming out from it. It's very iconic, and this was another early album that I got into by this band, so it does have a special place in my heart. But the Mind Fuzz one is so classic too, with the giant hand looming over this cliff with looks like a castle on top, and these weird kind of like demon little devil type figures off to the sides. So Mind Fuzz is so cool, but you know what? I'm actually going to agree with you on this one too, and I'm going to pick Rat's Nest to move ahead as well.
Wow. Okay, you totally shocked me there, Joe.
Yeah.
This is one where I felt you were going to dig in your heels a little bit more, and we might have had to do another coin flip if all else failed. But actually, to reveal what I was hinting at earlier, I'm in Your Mind Fuzz is actually derived from inspired by the cover art for an old video game. Actually got this bit of information from the album's Wikipedia page. Quote, the album cover by Jason Galea was inspired by the cover art for 1983 Atari 8-bit computer game Fortress, which was originally designed by Louis Seacow and which Galea repainted for the album. So basically, as I understand it, Galea did all he could to track down this man who made that original artwork for the video game so he could give him proper credit, and he wasn't able to track him down until several years later. Finally, I guess in 2019, he made contact with him, and he added his credit to all future pressings of the album. So Jason did all he absolutely could to give this man all the credit he deserved. I do appreciate the retro video game aesthetic that that is present in this one. And actually looking at that video game cover, you get, I believe, just kind of that central jagged mountain with the hand over it. Those kind of demonic creatures on the sides are what Jason added to the album in order to make the album art. But all that said, I think I just like the originality, the original vision more for Rat's Nest and the abstract nature of the sort of split rat skull, creating that imaginary doorway. So I think that's what gives it the edge for me, but I'm glad, all said and done, I'm glad we're in agreement on this one.
Yeah, that is so cool. That was a fact I never knew about Mindfuzz before, and it is crazy. Like, the middle section of the album cover with the hand and that castle and cliff and everything is taken straight from this old Atari game cover. So that is a super cool fact, and I love that about it. But yeah, I love the originality of Rat's Nest and just sort of the dark, ominous feeling it gives you leading into that album, and it just fits the music so well somehow. So it looks like we are more than halfway through the preliminary round of the tournament here and now, more than halfway through the albums. So moving on to this next round here, I lost track of what round number it is. I don't even care anymore. We're moving on to an album we just covered, Butterfly 3000, up against their collaboration with Mild High Club's Sketches of Brunswick East.
Oh, God. Okay. We've had a couple of difficult matchups so far in the bracket. I think this is going to be one of the hardest for me. You have the kaleidoscopic, like, kind of stereogram. I think that was the word given to define this sort of pattern that Jason Galea created.
Auto-stereogram, I think, was what it was called.
Yeah, auto-stereogram, thank you, because this was the subject, of course, of one of our recent episodes. This one is iconic, it's eye-catching, it is beautiful with all the 3,000, exactly, of course, butterflies that combine to make these patterns. But you have the trippy and kind of old-school comic-looking Sketches of Brunswick East, and I said we would not let the music contained within these albums dictate how we end up ranking these or moving these along through the bracket. And holy crap, I'm just realizing as you zoomed into the artwork on this one, Joe, the band members are in it. They're peeking out of doors and windows. I never realized that before.
Yeah.
I'm not necessarily going to say that is going to influence my decision here, because it doesn't. But I think overall, just how it looks like there are lives being lived in this bit of work. So I'm definitely leaning Sketches here, because you just see this cityscape, these lives like combining and overlapping. Kind of looks like a couple of things that look a little bit messy and crumbling around the doorstep, around the central stoop here where this takes place. But I just love all the creative elements there, as much as I absolutely love the Butterfly 3000 cover. I'm going with this one on Sketches of Brunswick East. What do you think?
Oh boy. Okay. So yeah, I love all the details. I love the chaos of the Sketches album's cover. Funny enough, these are both two albums that I've picked up on vinyl very recently. I bought a Sketches record at my local record shop a few weeks ago, and I bought the Butterfly 3000 album online after doing our episode. I realized that I really need to have that in my collection, and I wanted to pick out a specific version of it, so I got that straight from the PDoom website the other week. So I have both of these, and I don't have them in front of me right now, but I've spent some time staring at both of them. As much as I agree with all the points you're making on Sketches, my heart immediately just goes to Butterfly 3000 because of the kaleidoscopic nature of it, how colorful and trippy and eye-catching it is, and the fact, like we discussed on the Butterfly 3000 episode, the fact that there are actually 3,000 butterflies that someone was able to count and figure out on this album cover is just insane, and the patterns and colors and the way they form into different shapes, I can't let Butterfly get eliminated. I'm picking Butterfly here, so time to duke it out once again.
Here we go again. Yes, indeed. Looking at the Butterfly cover again, yeah, just obviously we gave the factoids on it before, the fact there are 3,000 exactly butterflies and somebody actually took the time to count, which, once again, kudos to that person. I don't know how you had the patience, the time, whatever. Holy crap. Yeah, dude, looking at these back-to-back, like, zoomed in to extents that I've never seen these album covers zoomed in before, You might be winning me over a little bit on Butterfly because it's so beloved. The Butterfly in general is just such a another emblem of the band, right alongside the the fishy face and the nonagon and all of those different elements. Sketches, I'm not taking back any of what I said about Sketches. I like the little cityscape there and the just the scene of it all. But the more that I think of it, I think Butterfly has the potential to capture the eye even longer because there's so much more to see and to pick out in terms of how the butterflies are all laid out and arranged to make this pattern. Whereas with Sketches, yeah, it's really cool, but I think at a certain point you keep looking at it and it's like, okay, I think I've seen all there is to see once you get to a certain point. So I'm comfortable with giving this one to Butterfly.
Oh, let's go. Another dub for me. Another little detail that I just noticed staring closely at the Butterfly album cover. I never saw this before, but take a look down at the bottom. There's 4 big yellow butterflies that go across the bottom of the album cover. They have the letters KG and LW on them, and I've never noticed that until right now.
Wow. Yeah, that's a really good that's a really good eye there, Joe.
It's so tidy. It's so tidy.
Yeah. Oh my god.
All right. So we don't have to resort to the coin flip this time. Butterfly's taking it. Thank you for bending the knee to me on this one.
Next up, we have Petrodragonic Apocalypse against Gumboot Soup. Now, Gumboot Soup was, of course, our most recent album discussion topic, and we discussed its merits of just this throwback-looking, almost comic book-esque artwork style by Jason Galea. You've got the big boot and all the metaphorical soup floating around it. You got like some sort of like half-dead shrimp and then a carrot and then all these bright orange-colored musical notes, all these different fun elements floating in this soup, this weird murky soup that also has a tire and an apple core inside of it, so I don't think I would want to eat this soup in all actuality. But
it looks pretty rancid.
Pretty rancid, pretty disgusting, yeah.
Pretty gnarly.
And then, on the other side of this battle, you have Petrodragonic Apocalypse, the just iconic dragon with the big power plant in the background, the explosions, the fires, the destruction, scorched earth, literal scorched earth behind him, and paints a clear and vivid picture of what all goes on in that album. By the way, without even having to put any words on the album artwork in this case. The band's name is nowhere to be found. The name of the album, of course, is nowhere to be found, which, yeah, try fitting that album name into anything.
Yeah, for real.
Even Spotify can't handle the official full name of that album. I can't wait till we get to talking about that one for an episode analysis, by the way.
Oh, for sure.
But, yeah, this one's a landslide for me. Dude, I'm going with Petro. This is one that also catches your eye on a record store shelf or in a bin, and you immediately want some of that heavy shit, whatever may lie inside, I think.
Petro, Dragonic. Okay, yeah, I'm just going to go ahead and make this a quick and easy one. I agree with you. Petro has to take this. Petro is so awesome. I love the little Gila monster dragon lizard dude on the front. He's awesome. I've seen people also get tattoos of this guy on them. I saw one that looked amazing like not long after this album came out that somebody did. And also to mention that this one is like a physical actual, I believe, oil painting that Jason did. I remember when this album was first announced last year on their Instagram page, they had posted a picture of the full painting. So that physical painting is real and out there somewhere. God, if there was like any memorabilia I could have from the band, how cool would it be to have the original Petro painting on your wall? Man,
definitely.
I would kill to have that. But yeah, the Gumboot Soup one is fun. But yep, I have to give it to Petro. I love the lizard dude. I love the just destruction and smog and fire of this like what looks like an oil refinery behind him. And also there's a detail that I saw someone point out on the King Gizzard subreddit once that I never noticed till I saw that. Spencer, did you ever notice in the top left corner what looks like the International Space Station burning and falling out of the sky in the smoke there?
Is that what that is? Okay, yeah. When we zoomed in on the photo here just now as we're recording this episode, I saw a little shape there, but I didn't know if it really had any sort of meaning to it. And also, Jason did a great job of sort of hiding it and disguising it with the clouds, just sort of shrouding it within those clouds and that smog and the explosions. So, dude, good pickup there.
Yep. Another fun little detail. When we stare at these long enough, we see all of it. So, Petro, Dragonic Apocalypse, Dawn of Eternal Night, or something, moves on. Okay, moving on. We got 2 more matchups left in this first round before we were able to move on to the second round of this whole tournament. So coming up right here, we have the Silver Cord, another recent one, up against another one of the microtonal excursions in the catalog, LW. This is another matchup here with a lot of contrast, a very different style. We're getting the final example of an album cover with the band members on the cover. Up against another kind of trippy, weird artwork with LW. I love what they did with KG and LW, the way that they've formed these letters out of these different shapes, and it's hard to even make out. There's all these weird shapes. This is another one that also looks like, and I never realized this till now, but it looks like it might have been a physical model of some sort that was then photographed, because if you look at the bottom up real close, it looks like it's on a table, like a platform of some sort, and the LW looks like it's made out of like clay or something that Jason maybe formed into these different weird patterns and shapes and cut them all up and put them together to form the letters, which is super cool. This is one that I've kind of underappreciated over time, to be honest. And the Silver Cord album cover is also cool and very fitting for what they did on that album. Of course, the guys surrounded by all of the synths and everything with the red glasses on, all wearing black, all kind of matched up and looking off to the side of the camera. It's pretty iconic too. We've had a lot of fun with this one being a more recent album. So what are your initial thoughts on this one, Spencer? I have some, but I'll let you chat about it a little bit.
Okay, well, the Silver Cord I love, and it got me so jazzed for its release. This was, by the way, after you got me into listening to Gizz, this was the first new album release that I was anticipating after I had become a fan of the band. I remember Petro was only a couple months old at that time, and then when they put out the singles and put out the album artwork, I was stoked as hell. And it's obviously very straightforward. Like you mentioned, they're surrounded by synths, multiple layers of them kind of tiered over one another, almost stacked. Several of their hands are on the equipment, and they, of course, have the Hantayumi glasses, like you mentioned, all of them. But this one, to me, just basically says, this is the one where they play synths. Almost like one of those Friends episode titles. The one where they all play synths.
Yep.
And, it's straightforward, effectively communicating. I think it's another cool, badass shot of the band. They all look so focused and content, and just like, they're on a mission at producing one of the coolest synth albums you've ever heard. On the flip side, you have LW, as you mentioned, looks very handcrafted, very home-cooked of sorts, maybe made out of clay, maybe some other material. But yeah, you zoom in on it, it's so intricate, all the little, holes and patterns and presumably maybe some cuts made with an X-Acto knife or other really precise tools. And looks like he had to take the photo also at a very strategic angle in order to properly capture the L and W shapes in this whole contraption that he built. There's a recurring pattern or shape here that just reminds me of that square, almost like a waffle-looking Chex Mix piece. It's like the 9 squares together. And
oh yeah, I see what you mean.
yeah. So you have that in all sorts of different shapes and lumps. It's so cool looking, and again, you've heard throughout this episode that I've been so biased in leaning toward the handcrafted nature of a lot of these pieces of album artwork. I'm gonna have to go with LW here.
One thought I just had about LW here is you might not be a big fan of this one if you have trypophobia, which is that fear of like a bunch of little holes being in things that a lot of people have. That's pretty common. It's kind of unsettling to look at it super close if you have an issue with that. So don't zoom in too close on it if you think it might freak you out. But interesting pick. I was actually surprised because, when you look at this album cover zoomed out, it just kind of looks like the letters LW, but there's so much detail when you get close that I'm now appreciating more than I did previously. On this one, it's tough because the Silver Cord album cover is pretty simple, but the way it's arranged with the synths around the guys, the glasses, the detail of, there's 3 of them looking to the left, 3 of them looking to the right. Cav's sort of electronic drums are in the middle too, and they all have the same sort of expression, and the glasses, everything. It's really tough. And you know what? I was going to give this one to the Silver Cord for all of those details, but it is kind of tough with how much detail is in the LW one as well. So I don't know. I might be willing to bend a little bit in your direction here.
Back on the same page again. All right.
All right. I guess I'll do it. We don't have to flip the coin, even though that was kind of fun. But I'm sure it's going to happen again.
Yeah. Oh, 100% it will.
Okay. Let's move LW on and go to this. Well, technically we have two matchups, but because of it being an odd number, one of them is getting a bye week on this first round here. So coming up next for our final real matchup here of this round, we have Ice, Death, Planets, Lungs, Mushrooms, and Lava versus the other letter album, KG.
Okay, so we have KG against IDPLM and L.
Yeah.
So if you want to go by initials,
L
that's yeah, exactly. This one takes an interesting left turn here. I'm looking at Ice, Death, Planets, Lungs, Mushrooms, and Lava. A little bit of a departure in what Galea has done with most of the pieces of King Gizz album artwork. This is, I believe, for the first time in the history of the band, his first time using the assistance of AI in creating album art. And I know AI has been a very hot button topic for the last couple of years. This album, of course, came out in 2022, right when all that AI stuff was sort of reaching ahead for the very first time. But I'm not going to hold that against Jason Galea because, he's an experienced and talented artist in his own right already. I'm not going to dock him points for, just using AI as a small tool to help kind of spark something and sort of give him a little bit of direction or use it in a way that he sees fit as an experienced and talented artist already. It's not like he's some Joe Schmo coming in off the street and like, okay, push a couple of buttons here, click a couple of things, and then boom, there's your album artwork.
Hey, what's wrong with being a Joe Schmo?
Oh, hey, Jack Schmo, I guess. Sorry, Joe. Should have been more selective there.
That's what I thought.
But anyway, the whole motif and feel of this album just evokes almost like a Jimi Hendrix sort of feel. It's very like late 60s, circa late 60s psychedelic feel. And the drop shadow of the yellow behind the red lettering naming the album there, which that font on its own is already very psychedelic looking and evocative of that same era. But you have the literal planets, you have the literal lava, you have the mushrooms, you have all the things mentioned in the title, like appearing on this album artwork, but they're presented in such this like explosion of the mind sort of pattern. And this is so trippy and cool. You have the band members' faces kind of distorted and shaped into the different objects that comprise this album's title. This one's so cool. And then on the other side of this matchup, as we mentioned, is KG, which we obviously gave big points to LW in winning that previous matchup against Silver Cord. And of course, KG is a similar idea, except in this case, it's the negative space that makes the letters K and G, and those crazy, fired clay or whatever the case may be, whatever that material may be, makes up the border, in between the K and G. That's cool in its own right, but I think between these two, dude, it is hard to say no to Ice Death. What do you think?
I'm kind of leaning the same way as you on this one. I mean, as much as I want to maybe dock a little bit of brownie points for the AI assistance, I think it's totally fine to experiment with that kind of thing and use elements of that mixed in with artwork. Obviously, Jason still put in a lot of work to make this happen and is obviously so talented, but just creates a really unique feel having that AI assistance in here. So it's really not too much of a bad thing. And you pointed out the font that make up the album title, listing all the things there. I love the colors of it, and the font really gives me the vibe of like 70s action movie or something, or maybe like something that like Tarantino would use for a film poster or something. I just love that. And also all of the elements of, these different things listed in the album title are kind of represented in the artwork itself. You have these like strings of mycelium and the blossoming mushrooms, and obviously there's lava, magma, all that good stuff as well. Planets, of course. It's all there. It's got everything. So I'm going to go ahead and agree with you on this one. Of course, we gave points to LW, and KG's got the same aesthetic and same, kind of thing going on as that did, but Ice Death just looks too cool, way too trippy, and just has a lot more to stare at for a while. So let's go ahead and push that one on through.
Okay, so our next quote-unquote matchup is not actually a matchup. We mentioned earlier in the show that there is an odd number of album artwork pieces here in this bracket, 27, so one of them randomly generated got the bye, and what do you know? It's our beloved Fishing for Fishies, which we think, as unbiased as we could possibly be, is phenomenal anyway. So Fishing for Fishies, you get the bye. You're moving on already.
We will let it freely swim on to the next round. Okay, so now that we've touched on all of the album covers and we're moving into the next round of the tournament here, we're going to pick up the pace just a little bit and kind of blast through these for the sake of time because we still have so much to get through, but we've already given all our thoughts on these, so now we can just kind of look at the matchups and give a quick argument for why one beats the other and get through it. So round one here is Quarters up against Paper Mache Dream Balloon, and we had a lot of nice things to say about both of these in the previous, the beginning of this tournament here. Quarters, obviously, with the 4 panels, each representing a different song, and our beloved Paper Mache Dream Balloon with the great clay figures of the band members, colorful bubble letters, and everything. For me, as much as I love the general idea of the Quarters album cover, I love how trippy it is and how it's got its own panel that represents each song. For me, it's really hard to eliminate Paper Mache. I love it so much. What do you think?
Yeah, I'm going to go the same way. I love the concept of Quarters with the different panels representing the different songs. Paper Mache also, I think, serves a nice purpose of if you're trying to get somebody into King Gizz via the more gentle side of the band. The music obviously stands on its own well, and also this album cover. What could be more welcoming out of the King Gizz catalog than all these little figures made of clay and a nice pastoral countryside beneath a nice cool blue sky backdrop? Yeah, Paper Mache wins this one.
Okay, easy enough start. Paper Mache moves on.
Next up, in this second round of the bracket, we have Changes against Oddments. So Changes, we discussed that kind of basic, simple-looking border, but with the touch of the piano or keyboard keys around the outside, along with the centered photo of the band in front of that graffitied wall in the skate park in Barcelona, Spain. And then the beautifully trippy, psychedelic Oddments. Landslide here for me, Joe. Oddments all the way. How about you?
Oh, I'm kind of surprised because I know how much you like Changes, and I thought that maybe get some more points, but yeah, we might have to go Oddments on this one because, as cool as Changes is, and it might be my favorite of like the photograph of the band members' album covers, Oddments is so iconic, so trippy. There's so much that you could just stare at forever. So, yep, I am not going to fight you on this one either. Let's go ahead and give it to Oddments here. Oh boy. Okay, this next one is going to be a little tougher, I think. We have Podagon Infinity up against Eyes Like the Sky. Of course, Podagon, I was able to convince you to give it to over Float Along, Fill Your Lungs. And Eyes Like the Sky was another one that you initially picked in its first round to get that one through. And I managed to bend over Polly, bend to Eyes Like the Sky to pass this one through with you. So we have a strong argued for pick by me against an argued for strong pick from you. Podagon against Eyes Like the Sky. What are we thinking? I think I know your answer on this one, though.
Yeah, I wonder if this actually does line up with what you're thinking my answer will be. Podagon is so iconic, and that's the direction I'm leaning. As much as I love Eyes Like the Sky and made such a strong point for it earlier and was able to somehow convince you to go with it. Dude, Podagon is just such a symbol of the band, and, it's just so synonymous with King Gizz, and I have a hard time, making a stronger case for Eyes Like the Sky against this one, so it's Podagon for me.
Oh my god, my mind is blown. I thought for sure you were going to try to get Eyes Like the Sky through here for sure this time because you had to kind of fight me to lean that way with it earlier. And, I had to push you to get to Podagon, but that's amazing. This time we're almost flip-flopped a little bit because I was going to lean towards Eyes Like the Sky a little bit just because of all the detail and how well it represents the whole vibe and story of that album. Of course, I argued for Podagon earlier with the iconic nature of it and the symbolism of that Podagon symbol on the cover and everything, but I was going to kind of flip-flop and go the other way, so we're kind of backwards now.
Damn.
Oh, boy.
Do I sense a coin flip coming here?
Maybe. This is tough, but Eyes Like the Sky is I feel like an underrated, great album cover, but
and at the same time, I won't lie, I feel goofy for having made such a strong point, made such a strong push for Eyes Like the Sky, and all of a sudden dumping it to the curb.
Yeah,
I'm not going to lie.
Well, I think most people would probably be upset if Podagon Infinity got destroyed, so I don't know if I need to put it through just for that reason, or if we should resort to the last resort of the coin flip, maybe.
Oh, man. You want to do a coin flip?
Yeah, let's do it. This one hurts because I was arguing for Podagon earlier, and I love the iconic nature of it. I think we just need to leave it up to the gods on this one. So let's go ahead, do a coin flip. I gave you the choice last time. I'm going to take tails this time on this one. I'm going to say tails for Eyes Like the Sky and heads for Podagon.
Let's do it.
Okay, here we go. And it's heads. You've won again. Podagon it is. You know what? I'm not mad about that because I find the Eyes Like the Sky album cover just having more to look at, but I'm not mad about it at all because obviously I was fighting for Podagon earlier and love it, and it's iconic, so it's gonna stay.
I think this one was meant to stay, yep. All right, next up, Omnium Gatherum against Flight B741. I know I made a good case earlier in the show for Omnium Gatherum's just total badass and gravity to it. It's just there's this palace with those menacing gargoyles on either side holding the sides and the pointy mountain peaks surrounding the whole scene and the clouds that sit below this palace or this entrance, whatever it is. But then you have Flight B741, which looks so bright and inviting and maybe a hint of goofiness or tongue-in-cheek to the whole motif there. To me, there's no question on this one. As much as I love Omnium Gatherum and made the strong case for it earlier, Flight B741, there's just so much more fun going on and a little bit more to catch the eye, I think.
These were two that you argued for heavily earlier that you loved a lot. Of course, I agreed with you on B741 earlier, and Omnium was, I think, the result of our first coin toss in the first round. But yeah, as much as there is so much detail in Omnium and it's so trippy and cool, I'm going to go ahead and agree with you here and give it to B741. Of course, it's the newest of the albums and we haven't had as much time to stare at it, but I've spent enough time looking at it to know I love it and appreciate the physical work that went into creating this and photographing it. I just love it. So B741 it is. Okay, moving on to the second half of this round here. The matchup next is coming down to Infest the Rat's Nest versus Butterfly 3000. Oh boy, this one's going to be hard too. I love both of these so much. Of course, I spoke highly for Butterfly earlier. I had to convince you to pick that over Sketches. I love the trippy nature of it. All of the detail and kaleidoscope sort of vibe of the whole thing is amazing. And the Infest the Rat's Nest album cover is so iconic, so dark, and just gives you such a picture of what you're getting into when you listen to that album. This one's really, really hard. I'm trying to like just feel my gut and what my initial thought is here, and I'm honestly kind of stuck. So I'm going to let you go first, and then I'll come back to it.
Okay, that's probably a good idea because this one is pretty clear-cut to me. I think it's Butterfly 3000 that has to move on. I spoke the praises of Infest the Rat's Nest with the whole symbolism of the rat's skull turned on its back with the two halves kind of forming that doorway into hell, presumably representing what's on the back half of that album. It's so cool and so menacing there, but just the sheer power of Butterfly 3000 and just the intricate work, just design work that Jason Galea must have taken with Butterfly, that one has to win in my mind.
You know, I hear the words that are coming out of your mouth, and at the same time, my brain just keeps telling me to go with the opposite, just for the sake of argument. Like, my brain is just saying, rat's nest, rat's nest. Even though I felt very neutral going into this, I'm now, like, kind of leaning the other way a little bit. Man, these are two beloved albums in my heart, and beloved album covers, and I love this artwork. I think they both kind of give a good feeling to the music that is behind both of them. As much as I want to just use our brains and figure it out and problem-solving methods, let's just flip the damn coin.
Let's do it.
On this one, I'll let you pick first this time. We'll kind of go back and forth. Heads or tails for Butterfly 3000?
I'm going to go with heads for Butterfly 3000.
All right, and that's tails for Rat's Nest. Here we go. And it's heads. What the hell's
Butterfly.
going on? You've won everyone. This coin is rigged. This is biased. This is a rigged coin. You must run this coin flipping program that I'm using, and I'm telling the police.
How do you check the weight of a digital coin? Tell me that.
Yeah, you've weighted it. I don't know how, but you did it. You're a programming mastermind. Well, son of a bitch. All right, well, I'm not going to be too mad about it. I love Butterfly, and I was fighting for it earlier. So Butterfly beating out Rat's Nest on this one.
Okay, so we're close to figuring out who our quarterfinalists are in this bracket competition. Next matchup is between Petrodragonic Apocalypse and LW. Well, this one is pretty clear cut for me, Joe, but I'm going to let you kind of work through your opinion on it first before I tip my hand.
It's Petro. That's it. It's Petro.
Okay. Let's do it. Make it so.
This is, I think, the easiest one for me so far. Obviously, we sung the praises of all the little details and how LW is put together in a like physical clay or some sort of similar material is really cool, but I love the Petro album cover too much, so be you there with me on that?
Absolutely.
All right. Easy one there. Petro moves on. All right, final matchup of the quarterfinals. This might be another tough one here. We have Ice Death, Planets, Lungs, Mushrooms, and Lava up against our beloved Fishing for Fishies. And we haven't gotten to talk about Fishies yet because it got the first round bye, since we have an odd number of album covers here. But here it is. For me, again, trying not to let my love and my special connection to Fishing for Fishies music swing me too much one way or the other, but I think I still have to go with Fishies here. I love it. The Hantayumi cyborg figure fishing, pulling the fish, and there's flames and smoke all around this sort of marshland or naturescape where he's standing. It's just too good. It's too awesome. I love this artwork, so it's Fishies for me.
We might have a problem here, Joe. I, at this point, am leaning significantly Ice Death. And the reason for that is just because of the sheer number of elements that go into Leia having made this. And I just have a hard time like pushing Fishies past this one where there's so much depth. And I too am trying not to let my bias show through here. In fact, I would put Fishies over Ice Death in most instances any day. But dude, this one is tough, and I had a hard time making this call, but that's where I'm at right now. We need to duke it out a little more.
I have the album covers pulled up here for both of us while we're going through these, and just look at this. Look Hantayumi in his glowing, lifeless red eyes and tell him that you're going to pick Ice Death over him.
Admittedly, that is not as easy once you put Hantayumi's face in front of me. And the Fishies' face is, I feel sorry for Fishies.
Yeah.
Dude, you might be selling me. Okay, I'm flipped. You flipped me. Fishies.
Yes, let's
Moving
go.
on.
No more coins. No more flipping that rigged coin. Let's just give it to Fishies this time. I love it. Thank you.
Alrighty, so just a quick scoreboard update, if you will, on where we sit right now in this bracket. We have 7 pieces of album artwork remaining in this bracket. Some of the upcoming matchups here. Paper Mache Dream Balloon will face off against Oddments. We have Podagon Infinity facing off against Flight B741. We have Fishing for Fishies getting the bye. Fishing for Fishies really getting the cupcake schedule here.
Yeah.
And then we have Petrodragonic Apocalypse facing off against Butterfly 3000. So 7 pieces of album artwork remaining. Let's get right back to it.
That damn top-seeded Fishies is getting the easy route this season.
Yeah.
Okay, this is where it gets tougher and tougher as we move further and further. So let's get into it here. So as you said, first matchup, Paper Mache up against Oddments. What's your first thought, gut reaction, go?
Paper Mache.
All right, I'm also going to give it to Paper Mache. Woo! Got to keep things moving here. We love Oddments. It's psychedelic and trippy and iconic classic album cover of theirs, but the Paper Mache one is too good. Let's give it to Paper Mache. I like that.
The next matchup, Podagon Infinity against Flight B741. Dude, I don't know which way I'm going with this one, so let's do like we did last time. Let's give our gut reaction on 3. 1, 2, 3.
Podagon. Let's go.
Hey, all right.
Wait a minute. Look at that. This is easy. Oh, yeah, we love B741. We've told you already so much about why we love it. But, yep, our gut reaction's going to Podagon, so let's move it on forward. Podagon lives, a fan favorite. Okay, next up. God, this is going to be a harder one, I think. But Butterfly 3000 up against Petrodragonic Apocalypse. Ooh, this one might take me an extra second. I don't know if I could do the gut reaction thing. I don't know. This one's harder.
If you need a moment to work through it, I'll give that to you, and I encourage you to share your thoughts as they come to you. I have a good idea of which one I want to choose, but I won't reveal it just yet. Joe, what are you thinking right now?
Okay, you know what? Fine. I've talked so much about how I love Butterfly and what makes it unique and cool, but I'm leaning towards Petro here.
You had me in the first half, not gonna lie. Glad we agree on this one, though, ultimately.
All right. Our little lizard buddy moves ahead.
And then, of course, as we mentioned, Fishing for Fishies got the bye in that round, so Fishies automatically moves on to our final four.
Wow, we actually moved through the quarterfinals pretty quick there. I'm surprised. We're down to our last four in the semifinal round now. So coming up first, it's Paper Mache Dream Balloon up against the legendary Podagon Infinity.
Dude, I don't know where to start on this one.
This is a bad idea. Why are we even doing this?
It's like choosing a favorite child.
Yeah, for real. We're down to our last four. Our pick a favorite child.
And you know what's so ridiculous about this? You'll recall earlier in this episode that I almost knocked out Podagon in the first round in the hands of Float Along, Fill Your Lungs. And I still don't regret the complimentary words that I gave Float Along, but the fact that it came so close to being knocked out just from the very first stage here, and here it is in the final four. Dude,
yeah.
Bracketing was the right choice here.
Yeah, and seriously, and no shade to Float Along, Fill Your Lungs, but I don't think it ever would have made it as far as Podagon has here.
No. Okay, so I'm going to try and walk through my thought process here. The iconic symbolism of Podagon Infinity, that's going to make it a tough obstacle for any opponent to overcome. And of course, Paper Mache is just so warm and inviting and cozy, but I'm trying not to let my personal biases interfere here. I'm not going to say, obviously, which album I hold in higher regard when it comes to the music, because we have yet to review Podagon for an episode, but I feel like so much of the way I feel about Paper Mache is being colored, admittedly slightly, by the way I feel about the music. And just as much as I love that artwork, I think Podagon has to take this one, dude.
Yeah, it's really hard. I hear what you're saying here. It's tough. This is like, again, like you said, picking your favorite child here. It's like, this is where it really gets hard in this bracket, and where I regret doing any of this, because it hurts. It really hurts. But, you might be onto something with just the iconic symbolism of Podagon here. Even though it's a lot simpler and there's not as much to look at, there's not as many pretty colors or images happening, but maybe that even gives it some points, like the simplicity of it and the dark coloring of it, the red and black, and that big, bold King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard font right in the middle of the Podagon symbol is iconic, and it does everything that it has to do as an album cover. So yeah, I think we have to give it to Podagon here. I can't believe our poor baby Paper Mache is no longer with us.
All right, so on the other side of the semifinals, we have Petro Dragonic Apocalypse against Fishing for Fishies, both very fire-forward album artwork, if you will. And once again, I don't know where the hell to start, man. I don't know. You?
Yeah, very fire-forward, very burning the whole earth with oil and pollution and all that sort of vibe. And man, Petro is just badass, and it's just awesome. It's like kind of silly with the cool dragon lizard dude, but then also like everything burning and just the scorched earth background is hard to beat too. I also just want to add that, Fishies does have the addition of Hantayumi and his little suspenders and hat fishing here, which is just always pleasant to the eye and makes me smile. So basically, we just have our little lizard dude versus Hantayumi here, duking it out.
My wheels are starting to turn here, and remembering that you brought up the fact that Petro is an oil painting made by Jason Galea, and there are so many more details throughout in the background there than there are, I think, Fishing for Fishies. But you made a good point with the, Hantayumi is just like we have with Podagon, with the Podagon shape in the background there. Hantayumi is obviously another big part of the band's symbolism and the band's lore. So, it's two different art styles. We mentioned they're both fire forward, environmental destruction forward, thematically here. Oh my God, dude, this hurts me. I'm going Petro.
Oh, man, he's done it. He said a thing. He picked one. Whew, I'm actually a little surprised. I mean, I thought for sure you'd go Fishies. Like you said, they're both paintings, but kind of different styles. Fishies is more kind of cartoony and goofy, and Petro is very much more realistic, more detailed, and for the sake of all that detail and everything, maybe we do have to give it to Petro. I'm really stuck right in between, but since you decided and picked one, I'm just gonna let you pull me in your direction a little bit and give it to Petro.
Hila! Hila!
All hail King Gila. But will King Gila be able to hold on to that crown in the finals up against Podagon Infinity? Stay tuned. Don't go anywhere. We've made it, people. We're at the finals. We're at the end here. It's Podagon Infinity, an absolute classic, an absolute iconic, beloved King Gizzard album up against a newer one in the discography, the absolutely shredding, heavy as hell Petrodragonic Apocalypse. Both different styles, but both full of jams, full of energy and chaos. And wow, this is a hell of a matchup. I didn't know it was going to come out this way, and it's just as hard as I anticipated to pick between these two. Do you have any thoughts, any gut reactions hitting you right off the bat, Spencer?
Okay, so we have dark and heavy against dark and heavy. Slightly different aesthetics, both visually and musically, but, that's just a little more for depth of explanation. We're, of course, as we've said multiple times, not letting the music factor into this as much as possible. But, you have that kind of three-dimensional with lots of depth, Petrodragonic Apocalypse, and then Podagon has some depth too. You have the craggy cliff in the background. It's almost like two different approaches to kind of a similar darkness or heaviness. And, this is almost harder to me than if we would have ended up with, like, say, Podagon against Fishies or Petro against Paper Mache. These two are almost cut from a similar cloth, but just with slightly different artistic approaches. I'm talking in circles, and I'm not leaning one way or the other just yet. How about you?
They kind of have the same color palette, too. Like,
yeah.
You have the yellow in the band's name on Podagon, and then there's that yellow and orange in the background of Petro. A lot of red and orange and yellow on both of them, and, like, black and gray, too, at looking around at the bottom of the artworks. Yeah, I almost wish that it came down to two that had more contrast, that we could, swing one way or the other easier, but these ones are... Oh, God, this sucks.
Big time.
There's no way that we can end this with a coin flip, though, right? Like, we can't do that,
no,
right?
Oh, absolutely not. You can't end a championship with a coin flip. So my eyes are darting back and forth, between this space about, an inch or so on the screen in front of me, between the two albums. Podagon on the left, Petro on the right. I feel like I'm back in my play-by-play broadcasting days, just talking about what I see in front of me. I can't predict what's going to happen, but of course, we are the authors of what's ultimately going to happen here, Joe. I am starting to lean very slightly in one direction, not going to give it up just yet, but, I'm not even going to explain my thought process here. I'm just going to hand it over to you and say that I think I've locked in my answer.
Oh, boy. All right, let's get on with this thing. Let's decide the final winner, champion here. Will it be Podagon Infinity, or will King Gila hold on to his crown here and be the champion? You said you've decided. I don't know which way you're leaning. I've decided as well. I've made up my mind.
I think we should say them at the same time on the count of three, like we did on some earlier matchups.
Okay, let's try it. And if we disagree, then we'll figure it out from there. All right, count us down.
In 3, 2, 1.
Petrodragonic Apocalypse.
No! Oh, no!
Oh,
no! What do we do from here?
Guys, what do we do? Someone help. The show's not live. We can't get any live help. It's just us here.
We will not be utilizing the coin flip, of course, but we do need to work this out one way or another. For me, I'm still having a hard time getting past the iconic symbolism of the Podagon. If you were to show somebody who does not listen to Gizz, that one album cover that's like, and chances are it may be one of their more popular albums, but I think if you were to show them, like the equivalent of Radiohead's OK Computer, or like Van Halen's debut album, Weezer's Blue album, just throwing out some examples there. To me, that's Nonagon.
You are totally right on that. And looking at it super close, this is another detail I never noticed until doing this episode. If you look really closely in, like sort of the four corner panels of the inside of the Nonagon symbol, like inside where the band's name is, it says the words Podagon Infinity along the lines of the inside of the symbol there. Do you see what I'm talking about?
What? Yeah, okay, I do. I noticed a little touch of something there before. I thought those lines were just dotted for some reason. I don't think I ever thought twice of it. I'm like, okay, those segments of lines are dotted. Not sure if that was just an aesthetic choice to break things up or something, but okay, that makes more sense now, and I like it.
One little funny thing here that I would like to remind you of is that you tried to knock out Nonagon in the first round with Float Along, Fill Your Lungs. Like, come on, man.
I know. Okay, yeah, I know.
What's going on here?
I'm coming across as an about face. I know, I understand. I probably come across as a fraud to a certain extent as well. But, people can change. I can change. Thoughts and feelings change.
I think you're a fair weather fan for Nonagon here.
Me, a fair weather fan? No.
Okay. All right. Well, I do like the idea of not ending it on a coin flip. And, man, as much as I love Petro and I like looking at it more because I like the silly dragon boy, I think you may have put enough in front of me. You got my mind racing enough to go ahead and give the crown to Podagon Infinity.
All right. Congratulations, Nonagon. And how about that? The namesake of our podcast. It was meant to be all along, wasn't it?
It was rigged from the start.
And this really is the equivalent of, the the team that finished the regular season above of everyone, in danger of getting knocked out in the first round, all of a sudden, if you want to choose a baseball analogy, this Nonagon came back from a 6-run deficit in the 9th inning and walked it off to win it, and then stormed all the way to the World Series title. An improbable but epic comeback. You love to see it.
Spencer, can you put your sportscaster voice to use real quick and just give us a introducing your champion, and then I can put some fun Nonagon music underneath of it here?
Yeah, let's do it. Your attention, Weirdo Swarm! The champion of this album artwork bracket, Podagon Infinity!
Woo! Yeah! All right! Yippee! Wow!
Enter caps. All right.
Must be a sold out crowd tonight. The place is shaking.
Yeah.
Alrighty, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us for this once-in-a-lifetime showdown here. The King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard album cover shootout. And we have crowned a champion. We have argued, we have agreed a lot, actually more than I expected.
Yeah.
And it came all the way down to Podagon Infinity. Of course, if the bracket was a little bit different, could have gone another way. But honestly, I'm a little bit not too surprised. It's an iconic one and a beloved one. So hopefully with this being the outcome of this tournament, people will not be coming for our throats too hard.
Yeah, I think it was a very satisfying conclusion to this bracket. And, dude, a fun journey to get there, too, don't you think?
Yeah, for sure. I had a lot of fun today, and I hope everyone listening did as well. This was a great time. Nice little divergence from our usual album discussion episode, but I'm sure we will be back to business as usual next time. So stay tuned for whatever may come next. And hey, Podagon Infinity is one of the albums we haven't covered yet, so maybe we'll have to keep that in mind to do very soon.
Never know. In the meantime, if you have any thoughts, ideas, questions, anything for us, you can always reach out to us, Podagon Infinity, on all the major socials, or you can email us, podagoninfinity@gmail.com.
Alrighty then. Well, until next time, folks. My name is Joe.
My name is Spencer.
Later, Gators. Woo! I almost mixed up the letters there and almost said rat's nuts.
Rat's nuts. Rat's
Mindfest
fuzz,
and
mine nuts.
Next up is Mindfest and Rat's Nuts.